Good evening, everyone, and welcome into episode 27 of the Forge Podcast. My name is Ryan Messer, and as always, the Forge Podcast is brought to you by Shotgun Sports Network Alabama of the Shotgun Sports Network. We have got a lot to get into. The Bulls had a big week up in Roanoke. The Squadron had a few games here in Birmingham and out up north a little bit, and then we have some Stallions transactions and some news to get into, and a little bit of drama that happened over the past week as well. And then we are trying to get you ready for the Birmingham Legion season that kicks off in just a few weeks, and they actually have the preseason season friendly with Atlanta United of the MLS. So that's coming up. Before we get too far, I want to thank you guys for watching, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook. I think Facebook might be going away soon because they're changing the way that they're doing their videos, going straight to Reels. So if that's the case, we may just be doing on YouTube, and we will just link it to Facebook. But this is the season finale of the Forge Podcast, season 1. So next week we will have a guest with us, and we will have season 2. What you're seeing right here is going to change a little bit better, and then we're also going to change the new intro. So, but thank you guys for watching and really supporting us for the past season. So we also have to thank Blue Spring Living Water. They've supported us throughout this entire journey here. So thank those guys for their support. They kept us hydrated all year long. They want to keep you guys hydrated as well. So make sure you go to bluespringlivingwater.com to check out how you can get that water that's sourced right up the road up in Blount County, Alabama, and it's bottled right at the source. So don't have to worry about any contamination or anything like that. So take a step toward a healthier life with Blue Spring Living Water. Another thing you shouldn't have to worry about is whether you are browsing the internet securely. Make sure that your information is safe from all kinds of things that you know are already out there across all of your devices with NordVPN. Make sure you hit the link in the description to check that out, and you can get a good discount with the link with NordVPN. And with that, this is the Forge Podcast, episode 27, season finale. Starting things off with the Birmingham Bulls, who had a few transactions over the past week. Starting off on Wednesday, we saw that right winger Elijah Wilson was waived, and left winger Tony Apedcon was actually signed to a standard contract. So good to have him on board there. On Thursday, we saw Corson Green get placed on the 14-day IR. Unfortunately, because we really need some help on the defense. But then we also saw center Jared Christie signed to a tryout contract. So good to have him aboard. On Friday, we saw defenseman Kyle Powell signed to a standard contract there. And then on Saturday, we saw that center McGregor Sinclair returned from the ECHL, which is great. Unfortunately, left winger Colton Olnick was put on the 14-day IR. And then Tobias Ojic moved from the 14-day IR to the 30-day IR. So, bunch of guys getting hurt late in the season here. Hopefully we can get these guys back soon, but it looks like we've signed some guys to fill in those spots there. As for the games this past week, we took a trip up to Peoria for a few games, and things started off on Thursday, where it started off with Jack Bodstedt up in the net for the Rivermen and Stewie in for the Bulls. The Rivermen got things started just real early with a goal just a minute and 46 into the game. Then Carson Rose was charged with a trip just past the 13-minute mark of the first period, and the Rivermen capitalized on that just 8 seconds in. The Bulls went on the power play for a slash with just 2 to play in the opening period. And then in the second, the Bulls went back on the power play around the 7-minute mark of the period, but they were unable to capitalize upon that power play. But Aiden Licka did find the net just seconds after the expiration. Unfortunately, the Rivermen did answer back with a goal of their own just 4.5 minutes later. And then Ben Higgins did answer back for the Bulls just over 30 seconds left in the second period. Into the third, the Bulls went on the power play for interference just under the 3 minutes into the period there. But unable to capitalize, the Bulls then went on the penalty kill just past the halfway mark of the period for a hook by Ben Higgins. That penalty kill was successful, but then they went back onto the penalty kill for a Taylor Brierly hold with a minute left in the game. But the Bulls wound up falling there 3-2, unfortunately, on that one. Then on Friday, we saw the game start with Bodstedt back in the net for the Rivermen, and then Lotzi in for the Bulls. That thing started off with a penalty kill just under 4 minutes into the game for Drake Glover's trip. So 10 minutes later, we saw Phil Ledzianko charged with a hook. And then about 3.5 minutes later, we saw Matt Clark get charged with interference. They finally did capitalize on that one, but their lead did not last long as Taylor Brierly did answer back just 29 seconds later with a goal of his own. Coming out of the first intermission, the Bulls went back onto the power play just under 2 minutes into the second. Unable to capitalize on that, the Bulls went back on the power play for a boarding just after that power play expired. They were able to capitalize on that one right before the power play expired. After the goal, the Bulls went right back onto the power play for a hook, and they were unable to take advantage of that one. However, the Rivermen did score just past the 3-minute mark there. Almost immediately following that, we saw Jamie Dorsey drop gloves with J.M. Piotrowski of the Rivermen. And then Romeo wound up getting an instigation charge tacked on to the deal there because he wound up getting tied up with Jordan Ernst. So, but Romeo and Ernst did only get roughing charges. So, coming out of intermission, the Rivermen did pull Bosted at 1.5 minutes into the closing period. And then seconds later, McGregor Sinclair was charged with a high stick, sending Bodstedt back in. The Rivermen scored again just 5 minutes later, and the Bulls did go back on the power play just past the 11-minute mark, but unable to capitalize on it. The Rivermen did seal it with another goal just after the power play expired. So, just rough going for it for the Bulls there. And then yesterday, they had another game up there in Peoria. The game started with Ricardo Gonzalez in the net for the Rivermen, and then Stewie in the net for the Bulls. The Bulls got things started off with a power play for a delay just 6 minutes into the game. Then a minute later, Trevor Thurston was charged with a major for a cross check and a double major for a game misconduct for that cross check. And then Peoria was actually, along with that, was charged with a charging and a double major for a game misconduct themselves. So it kind of canceled out there. Then 1.5 minutes later, the Bulls went back on the power play for a trip. Coming out of intermission there, because not able to capitalize on that, Ben Higgins found the net just 31 seconds into the second period. Matt Clark found himself in the box nearly 12 minutes later for an interference, however, and the Rivermen wound up capitalizing on that midway through the penalty kill. The Bulls did pull Stewie with 6.5 left to play in the second, only to send him back as the Bulls went on the power play for a hold just 5 seconds later. Unable to capitalize on that, the Bulls went back on the power play for a boarding with 3 to play in the period. The Rivermen did start the third with a goal just 7:47 in, and then the Bulls went on the power play just 6 minutes later for a roughing. Unable to capitalize on that one again. Right before the power play ended, the Bulls went on the penalty kill for too many men, and the Rivermen capitalized with a goal just a minute and 15 seconds later. Then, with just a minute left in the contest, we saw them score again, sealing their homestand sweep of the Bulls. So, Bulls just struggling right now. Really not able to capitalize on the power plays, and just unable to keep good defense there. As it stands right now, the Bulls are 15-15-3. Peoria Rivermen have jumped up to first place after their sweep of the Bulls this past weekend. Huntsville has dropped to number 2. And then Fayetteville Marksmen are third. And Bulls right now are sitting in 7th place. So hopefully we can get something going. They have some games this coming up weekend with a pair of games against Fayetteville Marksmen. So we will be there Friday. So can't wait to see you guys out there. Hopefully get the Bulls on a good winning streak. Switching things over to the Birmingham Squadron. The Squadron had a little bit of a road trip before they came home. Tuesday they were back at home as we had recorded there, and they were taking on the Wisconsin Herd over at Legacy Arena. Birmingham started out hot defensively, racking up a bunch of blocks and steals, but they were able to rack up to a 12-point lead midway through the opening quarter. The Herd wound up chipping away at that lead due to some missed shots by Birmingham, but they began taking advantage of some rebounds and rebuilt their lead back to about 12 by the end of the first quarter. Birmingham started the second, turning the ball over, leading to the Herd cutting that lead to a single score, eventually taking the 57-56 lead at the half. Coming out of the locker room at halftime, both teams went back and forth, but midway through the third quarter, Wisconsin built their lead to 9 off of a few turnovers by the Birmingham Squadron. With the lead being maintained all the way through to the fourth quarter, in the fourth, the Squadron defense wound up tightening up a bit, but their shooting still suffered, so that lead was maintained throughout the end of the game as Birmingham lost 112-104 at home. So a little bit of struggle there. They've been really struggling from behind the arc. I've said this before, if they're not shooting at least 30% from behind the arc, they're not going to win that game. That's how the game is won and lost. You can't just win the game in the paint anymore. So that game was just a big struggle for Birmingham in the paint there. Thursday, they went up to Greensboro, North Carolina, to take on the Swarm. Both teams came out strong, with Birmingham stronger defensively there. But due to the continued shooting struggles, they wound up keeping it close through the first quarter of play, with Greensboro leading 21 to 20. Leading 21 to 20. Greensboro maintained their close lead throughout the majority of the second quarter, and then before Birmingham wound up taking the lead with 4.5 left to play in the half. Holding that lead until the final minute of play, but when the Swarm wound up leading by a point going into the locker room at the half. Birmingham came out hot in the second half, though, by quickly retaking the lead, by building it all the way to 8, going through the midway through the third quarter. They held that lead going into the fourth with a score of 79 to 72. And then Trey Mitchell and E.J. Montgomery were really commanding force, forcing these turnovers like crazy through the second half there, quickly extending Birmingham's lead to double digits midway through the fourth quarter. And then with a strong performance, we wound up seeing Birmingham come out of Greensboro with a 118 to 98 win. So good, very good defensive performance. And then toward the end of that game, they started shooting really well. So on Saturday, they wound up coming back home to take on the Indiana Mad Ants. Birmingham started out hot, shooting well back on their home court, but they were able to maintain a slight lead through the final couple of minutes in the opening quarter. And then before Indiana wound up taking a 5-point lead going into the second. In the second quarter, Birmingham was plagued with turnovers, leading to the Mad Ants to extend their lead to by 14 points midway through the quarter. Birmingham did find a way to cut the lead to 7 going into halftime, though. Coming out of halftime, both teams wound up getting to work in the paint, and Birmingham wound up closing the lead to 5 at one point. But then midway through the third, they got the turnover bug again, and this led to Indiana wound up retaking the lead by double digits. Birmingham forced a few turnovers themselves, allowing them to cut the lead to 4 going into the fourth. And then in the fourth, Birmingham wound up keeping that momentum, and they cut the lead to a single score. But they wound up working hard. Unfortunately, losing, it wasn't enough, as they wound up falling 96 to 88. So really dug themselves a hole, dug out of it for the most part, just couldn't catch all the way back up in that game. I'm really proud of that team, how they were able to dig out of that deep hole there and get back into it. Then yesterday we saw the College Park Skyhawks come into town. Like the previous night, Birmingham started out hot, quickly jumping out to an 8-2 lead early. A strong defensive performance led to a few turnovers, allowing Birmingham to extend their lead to double digits there in the first. And they were able to actually hold that lead all the way to the second period. And then with some shooting issues by the Skyhawks, they were able to cut the lead. A couple shooting issues for Birmingham. The Skyhawks were able to cut the lead to a single score at the midway mark of the second quarter. They kept it close, though, through all the way to the half, with Birmingham leading 38-37. The Skyhawks did come out and took the lead quickly, and they kept it close through a majority of the third. but with some turnover issues, the College Park wound up extending their lead to 15 going into the fourth. Birmingham wound up turning some things back around to cut the lead to 4 midway through the final period, but as they kept it close and they were trying to hustle to make a comeback, it just wasn't enough and just too late as Birmingham wound up falling yet again at home, 91-87. Birmingham is currently sitting at 3-9 in the regular season and in last place in the Eastern Conference of the NBA G League and second worst in the entire G League. Hopefully we can get some things turned around. I saw some optimism in the way that these guys were playing. Not sure what it's going to take to get that defense. They were playing really good defense, but they've got to start shooting good from behind the arc, much better than what they have been. This week or tomorrow actually, they head up to Canada to take on the Raptors 905. And then on Sunday, they're heading up to Portland, Maine to take on the Celtics. So, got some work ahead of us. I know the Celtics, they're a really good team. So, we'll have to see how they go. Switching things over to the Birmingham Stallions. A few transactions occurred this past week, as on Monday, defensive tackle Jordan Thompson wound up retiring. I think he's taking a coaching job somewhere. I think it's a high school coaching job there. Tuesday, they wound up releasing a few guys, including our kicker from last season, Chris Blewett, cornerback Chris Jackson, and outside linebacker Malik Hall. But they wound up re-signing Davion Davis from previous years. And then Kaiva Tizino is back, outside linebacker. Everybody, he was really good forcing some tackles there. Put a lot of pressures on some teams last season leading up to the championship there. Then we also signed wide receiver Joseph Nagata out of Clemson. On Wednesday, we saw that we wound up releasing wide receiver Gary Jennings. We've got a big wide receiving core right now, so we'll have to see where that goes. And then we also signed outside linebacker DeAndre Johnson. On Thursday, they announced the signing of Alex Magoo. It was originally announced by James Larson that earlier in the day that he was going to be coming back as a quarterback. And then Mark Nelson with the UFL board wrote that he had spoke to coach that he was going to come back as a wide receiver, and the league on the transaction report actually said that he was coming back as a receiver. So how that goes, we're not sure. But Jay Sternberger released a text thread, as you can see right here, that he is definitely, it looks like it's from Alex himself, and stating that he was going to be coming back as a quarterback. Jace is much of a trickster. He does like to, troll a lot, but it seems like he was actually being genuine about this part, because there were a couple people that he wound up calling out Mark Nelson of the UFL board about that. And then there were a couple people that came to Mark's defense, and Jace wound up answering back with this graphic that showed that the article was highly probable to be AI generated. Yesterday, he also went on a rant on X about how people are struggling to cover the league, and how people using AI to write these articles are an insult to the league. So, um, just kind of a blast there. Mark Nelson wound up, as of this morning, deleted the UFL board X account and the UFL board website. Um, it's a really big blow there. I personally like Mark Nelson as a person. He worked with him past year, seen him in the pressers, stuff like that. Met him in St. Louis. We had the whole same hotel room, or not, same hotel, um, but in St. Louis for the championship. But it's really unfortunate that it came to that. Um, but hopefully all is well with Mark Nelson. Hopefully nothing too crazy comes out of that. But we did also find out this week that Birmingham has hired a new GM. They hired Paul Roel as their new GM. He had spent 15 years as a scout in the 90s to the early 2000s for the Colts. Then he went to the Vikings as a scout for the Western region for about 7 years, and then got promoted as a to the Jaguars for 8 years as their assistant director of college scouting. So, and then if you look at his LinkedIn page, apparently he had worked for the Legacy USFL as a college scout. I'm not sure if he retained the role at the merger, but hopefully he'll be a great addition to the team. Obviously, we're getting a bunch of guys signed, and hopefully we can build a team to lead us to another, to a four-peat. Switching things over to the Birmingham Legion. We have a friendly this coming up Saturday versus Atlanta United FC of the MLS, and we are happy to announce that we are once again covering the Birmingham Legion in the 2025 season. We just got our confirmation for the credentials, so we will be on the ground there for that one, and we will be bringing you the latest in Birmingham Legion. They had a bunch of new signings over the past week. We've been trying to put those out as much as possible, but as the season gets closer and once it gets started, we will be bringing you the game updates. So once again, season 2 of the Forge podcast is coming up next week. The Bulls are back at home in Pelham this week. The Squadron have a few games up north. And then we'll see you guys next week for the season 2 of the Forge podcast with a brand new look, brand new intro, and still trying to keep you guys updated with the roster and score updates throughout the week. But as for that, my name is Ryan Messer, and I hope you all have a great night.